There are certainly a few rather obvious, rather glaring issues facing the West Virginia football team as they go from 2025, a year to forget, in 2026 that we are all very, very hopeful for. Have those major issues been resolved? Are there answers? Let's talk about it as we're just a few weeks out from Mountaineer football.
This is the Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. From pregame to postgame coverage and breaking news, we've got you covered. Let's go.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Mountaineer Moment. My name is Troy, and this is your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. This is episode 289 of Mountaineer Moment, which is coming up on 1 year of producing West Virginia content, and super happy to be doing it. My name's Troy again, and this is fun, man. There are 289 episodes in, coming up on 1 year, coming up on 300 episodes, which is hard to believe. Thank you so much for the support and all the love and subscriptions and just helping us grow this community, which we plan to continue to do so. So if you have not yet subscribed to Mountaineer Moment on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you're watching or listening, hit that subscribe button for us and let's continue to grow this community together. Now, again, there are like major obvious things that went wrong in 2025. You might be sitting here watching or listening and saying, you know what? If it could have went wrong, it did go wrong last year. It's a new year. Everybody's 0-0. There's new opportunities. Could West Virginia be a sleeper in the Big 12? Could everything be resolved with the offensive line? Maybe a West Virginia wide receiver is going to step up. Do we have the quarterback that's going to, just absolutely go off and make a name for himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12? We have the nation's leading rusher from a season ago. He's going to make that work behind a rebolstered offensive line in Cam Cook. We've got a defense that brings in lots of new players, but they're players who have actually proven themselves at their previous stops, and we like the sound of that. But like this team, and we've talked about it in the offseason, this was a West Virginia football program that this time last year we were all just as excited as we are now. And we didn't sign up for the 4-8 football season that we got, but that's exactly what we got. And so what makes this year different? What are some of those major issues that presented themselves last season that have now been like, you know what? I mean, unless, you know, you just run into trouble that you can't predict, which is certainly possible for every team in the country as you sit here in mid-August, then this is going to be a West Virginia football team that fixes these 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever things that need to be fixed in order for them, Rich Rodriguez and company, to be able to right the ship. Now, in this episode, we're going to talk about there's lots of new faces yet again. I mean, yet again, like the same amount of players are new to this program again. And that was a problem last year. So how can we say that this is going to be better this year if it's the same kind of thing in relation to how many new players are here? Now, this team does have some star power, just maybe, that last year's team did not have. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about West Virginia from a depth perspective. Now, if you've been a fan of Mountaineer Moment for any amount of time, you know we've talked about that in relation to the West Virginia basketball team that Coach Hodge has assembled. But West Virginia football, maybe, just maybe, their depth is going to be the key to remedying some of these issues from last season. And then lastly, we're going to talk about it, man. Just this team, these players, this coaching staff. Let's prove it. Prove everybody wrong, right? If people are predicting to finish near the bottom of the Big 12, prove them wrong. If if you're a player with a chip on your shoulder who comes from a bigger school and you didn't produce much, and you're coming to West Virginia, a bigger school in terms of football, like a USC or an Oregon or an LSU, and there's guys on this West Virginia football team that come from those previous schools, prove it. If you come from a smaller school, we got lots of JUCO guys. We got, DJ Epps, a wide receiver we've talked about, who comes from Troy, who had 500 yards last season. Well, what can he prove to be at the Big 12 level? We're going to talk about that too. We kind of just did. But here on episode 289, let's start with that like initial kind of elephant in the room. Like, you have, again, another team with like 80 new faces. And here's what Rich Rod had to say, because again, last season and this season, there's some similarities as far as, well, it's a whole new rebuild, whole new thing. How do you build a culture? He said the concern is that it's the first year. It's the first season for a lot of guys. Now, we don't have 40 seniors like we did last year. I don't know what we have, like 16 or 17 seniors, so we'll have a lot of guys back, I think, unless they get bought out somewhere, whatever the case may be, which is funny and true and sad. But I think we're getting closer to developing the type of culture and environment that we want. But I can't make that statement after one practice. Again, West Virginia is just a handful of days into fall camp. Rich Rod continues, said, I would like to say, if you ask me this in 2 weeks, is the environment, the attitude, the intensity, how hard they play, is it where you think it should be after 2 weeks? If I'm not sure then I have concerns. But I think in 2 weeks, they'll be where I want them to be. So to me, point kind of number one and the right and fair question to ask as it relates to this West Virginia football team in 2026. There's a lot of new faces again, so why should we just believe it's gonna work, or it's gonna be better, or it's gonna gel, or you're gonna build that culture? One of the things that's you can kind of point to in that regard is you like to think that West Virginia, now part of this is something we're going to talk about in a minute, there's more depth, there's experience. Now, you had a lot of guys that were seniors last season, they're gone, you don't have as many seasons, so technically you're younger, but you have some really experienced groups on this team, which we're going to talk about. Defensively, you're replacing everybody. Um, but the belief is and the hope is that the quality of player that you brought in, again, whether freshmen coming in who you're thinking are going to make an impact right away, whether impact transfers that come from other power conference schools, you like to think that Skylar Callahan, he said, I'll just read what he said. He said defensively, West Virginia might be replacing all 11 starters, but the caliber of player they brought in is much higher than what they had in 2025. I agree with that to a certain extent. You like some of the pieces, and again, you like some of the depth. But let's not forget, 2025, we were all sitting here with loftier expectations than a 4-8 season. And I get that there were injuries and lots of things went wrong, and you had an absolute circus and carousel at quarterback. Um, but how can you depend on these guys on this team making it different here in 2026? I'm going to give you a couple reasons as to why, and I'm going to start with something that I think is just it's simple, it's easy to reach to that, but it's profound, and I think this team has some star power on it. Now I'm going to start in the running back room. Cam Cook, nation's leading rusher, is a West Virginia Mountaineer. 1,600 yards, 295 carries, or something crazy last season at Jacksonville State. He's here. He's good. Has Big 12 experience previously at TCU, went to Jack State, went off, and now he's in Morgantown with Rich Rod in this offense, and you like to think that he could excel as a part of that. Staying in the running back room, you've got Amari Latimer, a true freshman who doesn't look like a freshman, highly recruited by everybody, and he's here. Martavius Boswell is a 1,000-yard rusher last season at the JUCO ranks. He's here. Christopher Talley's a 3-star freshman who's here in this room. And so while, Cam Cook obviously is a star, bona fide star, Amari Latimer, absolutely no doubt in my mind, has star potential. And then along the offensive line, you talk about a freshman that comes in Kevin Brown, who was previously committed to Penn State, one of the biggest recruits in West Virginia recent memory. He's here along this offensive line, and he might be, and he is competing for a day one starting role as a true freshman with Rick Trickett and that O-line. And then, oh, by the way, if we finish it out on offense, everybody seems to be pointing to this Mike Hawkins Jr. kid, transfer quarterback out of Oklahoma, who's one of the fastest players on the team, who you would think off the top of your mind can just fit right into a Rich Rod system alongside Cam Cook and give defenses absolute fits. And we're hoping for that. I don't think Mike Hawkins certainly hasn't proven that he's a quote unquote star at the level of college football at Oklahoma that he was playing, but he wasn't playing a whole lot, but he's got star potential. There's no doubt about it. And that's just the offense, right? Defense, you bring in some pieces. You kind of have a nice mesh of freshmen that come in, transfers that come in, again, several coming from the JUCO ranks that are hungry. And then you got some, like a Harper Holloman who comes in from Western Kentucky, who has proven to be able to, create pressure on offenses in the backfield and get pressures on quarterbacks and stuff like that. Toby Hastrup, redshirt freshman who transfers from Oregon. Kid don't look like a freshman. Could he find a way in Morgantown? And so again, we're going to talk about the depth that this team may very well possess, but there is star potential at several different positions on the field for the West Virginia Mountaineers, and that's one thing that wasn't the case last season. Certainly not when Jaheim White went down. And again, the offensive line that he was running behind, it wasn't going to lead to a star-like season or performance for Jaheim White like we've grown accustomed to him having. Now, I hope he has a great season in North Texas, but with the way that offensive line was structured, with the way the quarterbacks were in and out, receivers and those woes, that offense simply wasn't built to have a star. This offense this year might be built to have some guys that really turn some heads, even in the Big 12 conference. So that is an encouraging potential reality that you've got some star power. Now, again, in addition to that is what I labeled on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, not listening, but you have stability, you like to think, and you have some depth. Now, last year, again, we've said it a couple times, last year was an absolute circus with injuries, with just you don't know who's going to start at quarterback any given moment. You don't know who's going to come out at any given drive. Defensively, had your struggles, had your injuries, and the thing just never got off the ground. And don't get me started on that offensive line. Now, in 2026, what did West Virginia do to hopefully answer that issue that you had? Because again, the team last year wasn't built to sustain injuries. And again, they weren't. It's not like I'm sitting here talking about a West Virginia Mountaineer team that was going to go 9-3 or 10-2 if they didn't have injuries. I mean, this team was not good regardless. But when Jaheim White went down, yeah, he had an answer of the miracle Ty Edwards forever, a backyard brawl legend performance against Pitt. But that was a one-game thing because he got hurt too. And again, behind Jaheim, behind Ty Edwards, you just simply didn't have it at running back. At quarterback, you had flashes of some good things, very, very, very early on with Nico. I mean, against lesser competition in the season opener again. Then against Ohio, things didn't work out well either. But then with the quarterbacks in that room, I mean, Scotty Fox would have been the bright spot that you would look to. Now he's back, and again, many are saying that he's not QB1 with Mike Hawkins here. Cam Vaughn who's made some headlines recently. If you don't know about that, look that up. Cam Vaughn, wide receiver for West Virginia. Some people liked him, some people didn't, but certainly a good receiver now at Miami for a reason, because he is a very capable wideout, but again, wasn't built to have a explosive season for this Mountaineer offense. You had some guys last year, again, on the defensive end that you liked, but it just wasn't put together. And again, I think one of the reasons for the struggles last season, not the only reason, was that you lacked stability and you lacked depth. Good teams are really good when they're 2 deep or 3 deep, and you continue. I mean, Rich Rod said it this week. He said, I want to play more guys than anybody else in the country, but he's going to focus on playing guys that can help you win. If you can't help us win this given week, you're not going to play. Now, again, the red shirt thing is done. You got guys that have 5 years to play 5 seasons, so you don't have to even worry about that. Rich Rod said he never really was worried about that, and I believe him because, like, if you can help us win, I'm going to play you right now. But that's gone. And while you like the sound of, okay, well, we don't have a lot of seniors, and you might not like the sound of that, but you like the sound of, okay, there's potential that we're not going to be digging for players in a whole new roster made up of 60, 70, 80 new guys in 2027. You like the possibility of retention. And I do too. And Rich Rod likes that. But like in 2026, as you head into another year after that, man, you you have no idea. No team, no coach knows what their roster is going to look like next season. And so in other words, that can't be something you bank on, can't be something you count on, but there is the potential for that. It's just the name of the game in the new era of college football. One position group that we've obviously spent a lot of time talking about over recent weeks is the offensive line, who we haven't talked about a whole lot in this episode, but this West Virginia offensive line, with who's projected to start, and there's obviously some guys, on that second unit who are going to see some playing time. But this is the most experienced group in the entire country with over 5,000 snaps. And so you have an experienced group with, transfers who I'll talk about in just a moment just to jog people's minds, or maybe you're catching up to speed on West Virginia football. Well, this is a good episode for you to watch. Um, and you pair that with Rick Trickett, who has coached offensive lines for decades and decades and decades, should lead to a better result up front for this offense. Now, again, this O line, some guys turning heads include a Wes King, who's projected to start at the center position, transfer from Wyoming, great in pass protection, like literally like never allowed a sack or something wild. Karsten Cassidy comes from UConn, Nick Cray, who's back, who was maybe him and Landon Livingston the least of West Virginia's concerns along the O-line last season. Landon Livingston might be moving out of that center role to a potential guard spot. Will he start? Will he not? Probably going to be in that second unit. You got Amari Grayson, the junior, who comes over from Jacksonville State with Trickett. You got Devin Vass. You got Malik Agbo, Kevin Brown, again, the true freshman 4-star guy who figures to be a part of this rotation. So there's depth along that offensive line, which is encouraging. And special shout out, just because I'm looking at his name right here, Cade Luke, junior fullback, who comes over from Arizona, where they had a pretty impressive offense last season at Arizona, and Caden Luke was a part of that. Impressive at times, and he was a part of their success. So, again, I just think in 2026, if we can say, all right, heading into it, now we're never going to know fully. I mean, hindsight's 2020. We'll look back on the season and know full well whether or not West Virginia was able to answer those glaring concerns that they had coming out of 2025. But as we're in preseason mode 2026 and everybody's 0-0, you like to think that these issues are resolved. And again, if you're concerned, well, let's be political here, right? Like if your concern was, all right, you got a lot of new faces, well, the rebuttal toward that as Rich Rod, like if I were to speak for Rich Rod and defend what he did in the offseason to recruit and bring in the pieces that he's brought in, you would say, well, there's lots of new faces, yes, but we like what we have. We like that there's a mix of experience and young guys that have potential to be an impact player for us from day one. And you like the fact that there's possibility for retention. And not only that, the pieces that you've brought in have proven themselves at previous stops that they've been at more than we had at Long West Virginia's previous team in 2025. Again, just to kind of rehash this again, there's star power at the running back position, especially. Cam Cook is an absolute stud. He's a star. There's potential stars along this offense and defense, more so than there was last season. And then lastly, stability. There's not as many questions heading into the season. Although there's lots of new players, lots of new pieces, there's not as many questions. Hopefully there's not as many concerns. And hopefully that's going to show as far as the product that West Virginia puts out on the field. And last thing I want to say is something we already touched on. There's a lot of guys on this coaching staff, on this offense, on this defense that are playing and need to play and coach with something to prove, with a chip on their shoulder. Again, there is a large amount of players that fit into these following categories, right? So you got a lot of incoming freshmen who are looking to prove what? Looking to prove that they belong day one, can contribute on this West Virginia football team. All right, there's returning players for West Virginia who, quite frankly, a lot of them, especially along the defense, there's quite a few that didn't start last season, played a little bit, but now they're looking to prove that they can be a key contributor on a West Virginia defense that looks to be better, be improved in 2026. Then there are transfers that come in from, young transfers that come in from um, big name programs. I continue to go to Teron Francis, the redshirt freshman who comes from LSU. And then you can continue to go to Toby Hastrup, the redshirt freshman who comes in from Oregon. Um, there's some transfers here that come from big schools. Josh Sapp, tight end, comes from Clemson. Cam Ball, redshirt senior, comes from Mississippi State. And then you also have some transfers who are looking to prove that they can play at this level. If I just do a quick count, do not hold me to this. I'm going to do a quick count of how many JUCO players West Virginia has that's their previous stop. Not, they were at West Virginia last year, but like last year they were at a JUCO school. You got 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least 12. That was a really quick kind of glance at the roster sheet that I made up. You have at least 12. There's probably more a couple that I didn't see right there that come in from JUCO programs. And then you got some guy, that's not counting a DJ Epps who comes in from Troy, who's not played at the power conference level. What's he going to look like? Then, a John Nider who comes from UConn. Those guys are playing with something to prove that they can play and they belong to be a key contributor on a Big 12 team that is looking to have a turnaround in 2026. Now, again, there's I don't know how many categories that was, and I spent so much time on that one, I forget what the last one might have been. There's lots of guys with something to prove. Play with that intensity, play with that fire, play with, again, that hard edge mentality that Rich Rod's trying to implement. And again, year by year, it's going to get easier because you will have some retention next season. But we're not focused on next season. We're focused on this season, and we want to win. We went 4-8. It was a struggle all year, and we want this thing to be turned around. And there's reason to believe it will be, but we're not going to find out for a few weeks and then some. West Virginia kicks off their season September 5th against Coastal Carolina at home for the whiteout. Pat White jersey retirement should be a awesome day in Morgantown. But we got a few more weeks left until game week. Now, game week here at Mountaineer Moment throughout football season, we'll preview the game. We'll have several episodes, just like we do every week in season and out of season, talking about, West Virginia athletics. But specifically in game week with Coastal, we'll preview the game. We'll go kind of behind enemy lines as a segment we've done before, predictions and just some things to watch for as we count down to kickoff game week. But we got a couple weeks before then, and so be on the lookout for more content with West Virginia football and basketball. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Episode 289 is in the books, and we will see you next time. Let's go Mountaineers.